Hello YouTube, this is Largo64. I often get questions from Christians and bits of conversation in personal messages, and sometimes I'd like to share a little of those with you. One person that I was having a conversation with offered that I might be offended by some of the things that she had said. I said, no, I'm not offended. I hoped I had made that clear in my reply to you. It's just that I get so many people trying to bring me back into the fold using Scripture like a shepherd's crook. I use Scripture too, but in the opposition case. When I do a video or answer the comment of someone I think might not know, I quote chapter and verse to verify that I know what I'm talking about. I didn't do more than paraphrase in your case because I expected you already knew the Scriptures and could have quoted me chapter and verse. I don't believe that I am a vessel, broken or otherwise. When I do good for a neighbor, it does put me out a bit to hear them say that God used me as if my own instincts would be only evil without some nudging by the big guy. Christians make remarks like that, and the old no atheist in foxholes saw, without realizing that, taken literally, they are insulting. I know a lot of atheists, and believe me, they are good people by nature. They don't have to be followed around by enforcers. You also wanted to make the point that the God you believe in sent his Son to die for you, and I presume for me. I can't accept that, because as I see it, it is no more than a modernized version of scapegoating. The ancient Hebrews periodically, I guess at the Day of Atonement actually, would heap all of their sins symbolically onto a goat, which was then driven into the desert to die, either by starvation or predation. That act was supposed by those fairly primitive people to relieve them of responsibility until more sins were accumulated and the drama was repeated. The idea of vicarious redemption, the plan of salvation written in the New Testament, is just slightly more recent continuation of the same custom. Only this time it's only one goat, and that goat is really a man, who is believed to take on the sins of all the people before or after his life in atonement for them. Have you never read in history about kings who, as children, had a whipping boy? Since no one could physically chastise the king, yet the Bible said not to spare the rod, another child of the same age was selected to take the young king's beatings for him. Did you not feel indignant at that story? Feel the injustice of it? Why does it not occur to you that allowing another person to take the punishment for every wrong you have ever committed or will commit is making them your whipping boy? How can you possibly believe that that is just? How can it be moral? Christopher Hitchens, a wiser man than I, pointed out that while someone else may be able and willing to take your punishment for you, he can never take away your responsibility. Allowing him to take your punishment is immoral, even if it could be true. The Bible has David saying that in spite of all his evil acts, including murder and adultery, he had sinned only against God. I think that's wrong. It is impossible to sin against one whom you cannot possibly injure. Asking God to forgive you is, to my mind, a cop-out. It's a lot easier to pray to a phantom than to face the people you've wronged and say, I was wrong and I'm dreadfully sorry. Easier to accept the forgiveness of a third party than to beg forgiveness of those whom you've hurt. Salvation will never replace making amends. Another Christian asked me why I would have faith in a parachute protecting me from a great fall, but I don't have any faith in Jesus protecting me from everlasting damnation. My answer was, I thought I had clarified that for you, but evidently not. That I don't believe in your God or in his alleged son or in any kind of afterlife. I tried to carry the analogy out. I believe in a parachute because I've seen them work and have personal knowledge of their efficacy. I do not accept some itinerant Jewish teacher from 2,000 plus years ago having the power to save me from some horrible, everlasting punishment that no one deserves and for which there is no evidence at all. The belief of millions or even billions of people does not make something true. It only makes those people credulous. I have not always been an atheist. I was brought up in a Christian household, stultifyingly so. My grandfather thought he was an apostle, so I had to listen to 4-hour sermons every week until I was about 13. When I reached that age, and my parents split from that dreadful church, I began to look into the whole thing for myself. I discovered that the God of love wasn't loving. And that the plan of salvation was unjust, and that just as I didn't exist for an eternity before I was born, I would once again not exist after I die. This life is like a flicker from a firefly. I intend to enjoy it while the light is on. But in any church, synagogue, temple, or mosque, the light is out. I try to avoid darkness whenever possible. Another individual brought up the problem of good and evil. Good and evil is a sticky problem, I grant you. Many people have told me that without the Bible and the Ten Commandments, there would be nothing but evil, that people would kill and rape and steal without restraint. The fact that 3/4 of the people in the world, even today, know nothing of the Bible, and yet have laws that closely match ours with regard to civil behavior, should tell you that morality comes from somewhere else. Some Christians have pointed to people like Hitler, Stalin, Mao, and Pol Pot to prove that atheists, if they were all atheists, are evil, but I think those individuals were exceptions, not the rule. That they were rulers, causing others to do terrible things, points to very complex conditions in their societies. Germans carried out the genocide of the Jews, for example, but that doesn't show that atheism caused those horrors. On the contrary, Hitler had them believing that they were doing God's work by annihilating the Jews. Generations earlier, Martin Luther would have done the same if he had had the power to influence enough people. The worst crimes against humanity were carried out by people who were terrified not to do as they were told. Most of them probably were moral in some context. Adolf Eichmann, who was one of the key Nazis carrying out the so-called final solution of the Jewish problem, saw himself as a moral man. He believed that Hitler was right in obliterating the Jews. And he actually took pride in the efficiency with which he carried out his task. But if you had met him in some other context of society, you might have thought him just like yourself, an upright and moral citizen. Morality is a terribly complex issue, and nobody is entirely evil. I'm a filthy atheist, at least according to many YouTubers who have flamed me over the past 3 years, yet if you met me in a different context, you might take me for a Christian. Jews have thought I was Jewish. The point is, I'm as good a citizen as I can be, and I try to treat everyone decently. One doesn't need an ancient tribal screed to do that. I pointed out in another video that the word moral comes from a Latin root meaning custom. The word ethical comes from a Greek root meaning the same thing. All societies have rules of behavior, and most of those are based on enlightened self-interest. You don't kill others because you would not be killed yourself. You do not steal because you would not be stolen from. It's really a kind of reciprocal agreement among people, protecting the individual by protecting all. What Western people call the Golden Rule pretty much sums it up. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Or the obverse of that coin, what is hateful to you, do not do to another. Rules in those or similar words can be found everywhere in the world. Confucius 500 years before the birth of the alleged Jesus, said essentially the same thing. The negative rule above was from Rabbi Hillel, a Jewish sage. The point is that with or without the Bible or some other holy book, you behave decently towards others. If you behave decently towards others, it is more likely that they will behave decently towards you. Reciprocity. I think that natural empathy of most people plays a role as well. Most people really want to be good. If you could pick up a newspaper and see nothing but stories of good deeds, you might think that would be nice until you realize that the reason all the bad stuff is reported is that most people don't do the bad stuff. It's only news because it's relatively rare.